I'm here today with Willie Dwayne Francois III, author of a new book from Brazos Press titled Silencing White Noise, Six Practices to Overcome Our Inaction on Race. Willie is senior pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church in Pleasantville, New Jersey, and president of the Black Church Center for Justice and Equality. He serves as assistant professor of liberation theology at New York Theological Seminary and directs a master's degree program at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. He created the Public Love Organizing and Training Project and has served in various organizations engaging racial justice issues, including the Atlantic City chapter of Black Lives Matter, the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, and the New Jersey Department of State's MLK Jr. Commission. Willie's an active speaker and has written for HuffPost, Sojourners, The Hill, The Christian Century, and Religious Dispatches. He is a Pi Beta Kappa graduate of Morehouse College with a Bachelor of Arts in History and Religion, named the ranking scholar in both departments. He received a Master's of Divinity from Harvard University's Divinity School, where he received the Hopkins Shareholders Award, the school's highest academic recognition, and served as the class of 2012 commencement speaker. Willie also has a Doctor of Ministry degree from Emory University's Candler School of Theology, and you can learn more at mountzionclc.org. So, Willie, it's so much of a pleasure to get to meet you and have this conversation.
The honor is mine. It's really a grace to be able to talk about this project and to be a part of this great work that you do is really exciting. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's wonderful, and congratulations on all you've accomplished. It's just quite an impressive background already. Even though you're not that old.
Right. Although some days I feel like I am.
So what would you like to tell people beyond what I described?
Sure. So I grew up in Galveston, Texas, to a single mother with a young sister. Really nurtured in a mid-sized Baptist church there. So a lot of my formation as a youth, my formation as a person who thinks about what it means to live in community with folk happened there in Galveston, thanks to the nurturing and compassionate leadership of my grandparents, my maternal grandparents. My grandfather is still living. My grandmother is now in sainted memory. She's with the ancestors. But really that formative time in Galveston, Texas, sometimes I'm able to see the trails of how I got here from there, and it just I'm always floored by how much that little island in Texas has shaped my life. I'm a father of one son. He's a 2-year-old. And I always think this is interesting. So I'm from Galveston, Texas, the home of Juneteenth. And my son's birthday is June 18th. And if he had only waited 9 minutes,
oh, wow.
9 minutes, he would have been a Juneteenth baby.
Wow, that's funny. So, I mentioned before we got started that, you're one of the few people from New Jersey, as I am, that I get to talk to, in some of these interviews. How did you make it from Galveston, Texas to Pleasantville, New Jersey?
Sure. So immediately after I graduated from seminary, I moved sort of home. I moved to Houston, Texas for 2 years, where I served at what I consider my home church as a minister of Christian education and discipleship there, Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. And from there, I moved to New York City, to Harlem, where I was an associate pastor for another 2 years at First Corinthian Baptist Church. And while I was at First Corinthian, I applied. I'm in the Baptist tradition, which means that you candidate for churches. There's no episcopate. There's no bishop that assigns you to a place. So I applied to the Mount Zion Baptist Church, and that is how I have been in New Jersey, the southern part of New Jersey, which is different than how we often think about New Jersey externally. It is southern in a lot of ways, but that is how I made it to the southern part of New Jersey, and I've been here for 6.5 years. 6.5 years.
Well, welcome to the Jersey Shore. It's been hot this year.
It really has. It really has.
So let's get to your book. As I mentioned, the title is Silencing White Noise, Six Practices to Overcome Our Inaction on Race. How did the book come about?
Well, so much was happening in 2020, a pandemic that had severe racial implications, class implications. The deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, sort of, I mean, it evoked in me a type of hopelessness that I had not wrestled with in my years of doing community organizing, of doing social justice work. There was that compounding reality of this pandemic, which was dizzying and dislocating and distancing in a lot of ways, and then these very real deaths that captured the imagination of the moral imagination of so many in our nation, but particularly watching watching Floyd die in that way. It maybe it was the fatigue of the moment of not being able, not, the fatigue of just vocational life up to that point, whatever the pandemic was doing to me, and then being confronted again with the legacy of this country, structural and interpersonal legacy of racism in this country, told me I want to say something. I felt like I had something to say. I felt compelled to address not those moments, but to address how those moments were really these dynamic symptoms of part of America's sicknesses. And I just started writing. And I paused and I said, well, maybe I should actually pitch this to a publisher. And through that process of refining the ideas of organizing this book, it actually became a therapeutic resource for me that really breathed some new life into my own anti-racism, education work, my own community organizing, and my own spirituality. It forced me to think about a spirituality for anti-racism. I don't use those terms in the book. In the book, I talk about an abolitionist spirituality. But really, what I was trying to work out is like, what are some spiritual principles that animate and live underneath, but also grow out of anti-racism work. So trying to articulate a spirituality of anti-racism, a spirituality of justice, where I land talking about it as an abolitionist spirituality, has been therapeutic and has helped to reset me in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's very cool. I mean, it's a big deal to write a book, right? I mean, it takes a lot of effort. So, I'm glad you persevered to make that happen.
It took as anyone would imagine, it took a significant amount of discipline. At the same time, I was starting a new job, which was a second job. I was still a full-time pastor, but now a full-time academic. And so balancing the teaching load and all the other busy work that they give professors, and then the demands of the pastorate were particularly unique during the pandemic, trying to be creative, trying to find ways to continue to connect. It took an incredible amount of discipline, and it might not have been healthy.
Yeah, I feel for anybody who was a pastor during the pandemic. I mean, that just was, it's already a difficult job, right? I mean, and then you throw on top of, that the ridiculous amount of change that was required and stress. And, so thank you for persevering through that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So who would you say the book is most intended for?
The book, in my opinion, I would say a primary, who I had in mind, like a profile I had in mind, was a moderate to progressive white person of faith, primarily Christian, but person of faith. I'm still of the opinion that it is really up to white folks to
Yeah,
abolish racism.
I agree with you.
It's the system they created. It's the system that ravishes non-white bodies and condemns non-white lives. And so often the leaders in racial justice movements are those who are most impacted. And I understand why that is, because it's a type of self-preservation work that we're doing. But the real onus for ending structural racism, interpersonal racism is actually on white folks. So that is the ideal. That's the profile that I had in mind, because I think there is some levels of evolution that I have encountered, moderate to progressive white folk willing to engage. But like I say in the book, it is really a piece for anyone, because although I am Black, and although I'm committed to racial justice fiercely, I know for sure that whiteness manifests in me. There are times that I perpetuate anti-Black thoughts. There are times that microaggressions bubble up in me. And so I think all of us have to attend to the ways that white supremacy as an idea, whiteness as an ideology, not an identity, not skin color, not ancestry particularly, but whiteness as an ideology, how that shapes us, how that forms us. That's why I talk about it as, I frame it, as you can see in the title, as white noise. It's the sound that's all around us, that lulls us to sleep, that makes us unable to engage the work of racial justice. And none of us are immune to how whiteness works on the body, how whiteness works on the mind. But I always think it's important to say that no, I'm not talking about an identity. I'm not even talking about individual people, but I am talking about a force, a power that works beneath the consciousness that has serious implications for who's hired, for how we do healthcare, for who we jail, for how we allow people to love. So all of us are really implicated, and I hope there is a message and instruction for all of us for how we can finally speak with clarity, conviction, and courage, and also act in ways that move toward repairing this harm.
And I think, most white people are oblivious, to the white noise. I mean, it's normal, quote unquote, because that's what has been what we've experienced all of our lives, for most of us. And so, highlighting that, I think, is important. And, as I mentioned to you before, I love the subtitle of your book, 6 practices to overcome our inaction on race. Well, that makes it appear to me to be very practical.
Sure.
Is that what you were shooting for with the book?
I was really, yeah, right. So there was a phase in this project where I wasn't as pragmatic as I should be. And I hope I reach some levels of pragmatism, of practicality that will be helpful. I think I do. But as someone who lives in academic bubbles, it's often hard to really nail how does this work on the ground. So it took some serious intentionality. So although it wasn't the original design in my mind, working with editors, thinking about like, man, what would my grandfather do with this piece? What would Miss Mary Briggs, a 97-year-old member of our congregation, what would she do with this text? And that compelled me to start thinking about where are the practices? How are we? I do anti-racism training, and I talk about practices in those trainings. I understood practices when I went through my own anti-racism education moments when I was being formed. And I was like, I want to do a book that actually offers people resources, practices, behaviors, exercises in some cases that allow us to interrogate ourselves, allow us to stand in the moral mirror, and really examine ourselves and not be afraid of being racially naked. to figure out the ways that racism is working on us, and also the ways that we can individually and collectively, interpersonally and institutionally, start to disrupt, start to that process of abolition so that we actually can get to a place of repair.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So I'd like to read a couple of endorsements for the book. This one comes from Publishers Weekly, which gave the book a starred review, which is a big deal. They say Francois packs this stunning manifesto full of history and theory, providing reliably sharp analysis, whether dissecting the Bible or Foucault. This is a superior volume on Christian anti-racism. So that's quite a powerful statement.
It was humbling.
Which is really cool, to hear them say things like that. There have been several books written on anti-racism, clearly. How would you say that this book's unique?
Well, this book, part of the uniqueness of this book is that it takes seriously, and I hope throughout, the way race intersects with other identities. One of the things I talk about in the book, having a syncopated identity. It's that moment where I'm able to acknowledge how my race intersects with my class, and my class intersects with my citizenship status, and my citizenship status intersects with my sexuality, understanding that none of us can live single issue, none of us can do single issue work, because none of us live single issue lives. That's that Audre Lorde piece there. So really taking seriously the intersectionality of our identities that allows us to name where we are privileged, but also name where we are oppressed. And I can name that as a man, I'm privileged, as a person, as a wage earner in this country. I have middle class privilege, and none of those things are canceled out because of the deprivilege that is associated with my race, right? So being able to hold those things in tension is a piece I'm interested in pushing forward. The fact that it's connected to practices, and many of those practices are grounded in a type of spirituality, whether it's memory, how we use memory, how we attend to history, how we listen to ourselves and to others, whether we're thinking about the power of grieving. In one of those chapters, I talk about moving from white guilt to white grief, right? Grief as something that we can heal from, but also honoring something that must die within us without us dying, right? So practices that are rooted in a spirituality, which is, of course, informed by my own Christian identity, but I also hope at many points is large enough for interfaith in engagement. I also think that a place where I try to move differently in this book is by actually naming and framing this as a crisis for democracy. This is about how we live together, and time is really running out. So that there's a sense of urgency that I hope I am attending to in this book as well.
Good. So here's another blurb from Aubrey M. Hendricks Jr. He says, a brilliant contribution by a brilliant man of biblical faith to the struggle to make America a truly just and humane society. So we've talked about how things have changed, over the last couple of years, dramatic changes on multiple fronts. How would you say the struggle is going now? Is it better? Is it worse?
Well, in the aftermath of January 6th, which was both religiously and racially motivated, and to a great degree, at least that's my read on it. So you have religion and race that play significantly in what could have been a profound dismantling of this democratic experiment. Literally, this experiment was minutes away from being compromised in ways that I don't remember reading about, and definitely not in my lifetime. White Christian nationalism is in many ways a badge of honor, in this country for so many communities, including sitting members of Congress.
Yeah.
I think that we are at a crisis moment as any we've ever been in this country as it relates to race. And I think that the way racial resentment, particularly of working class white folk, is being stoked, and the way that the division, the wedge between working class white folk and working class black folk and middle class black folk and other non-white communities as well is more alarming now. I've seen a sort of uptick in this since the first candidacy of Barack Hussein Obama, and it seems when you think that you've hit its climax, that there seems to be another octave to it, to use the sound metaphor again that I try to use throughout the book. So I think we are in a moment of particular crisis that requires us to think about the institutions and how white supremacy actually no longer needs white people to live because of the way that it is baked into our laws and baked into our economic arrangements and baked into our healthcare system. And then at the same time, being able to hold the fact that there still are individuals that have the power to perpetuate this on a mass level, and also individuals who have the power to take life or to deny housing or employment, an array of things. I think that this moment is an alarming moment. And that is what makes me feel as if time is really running out, and we have to seize this opportunity as a type of vocation, to see anti-racism as a type of vocation, as a type of spirituality, as I said earlier, that moves us into action. One thing I didn't want to do with the book is have another book that helps us talk about race. And we don't know how to talk about race.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. This is true.
Oh yeah.
But I wanted
politics, religion, and race, right? I mean,
right.
When I was growing up in corporate America, it's like you don't talk about those things. Sex was the other one too.
Sex is the other one, exactly.
So it's like you're not supposed to talk about those kinds of things. And I think as a society, we've gotten poor.
Sure. And as a pastor of historically disinherited peoples, I find it hard not to talk about those things. I consider what I do less about politics and more about justice, right? And in the book, I talk about justice is where spirituality and the political rendezvous, the spiritual and the political rendezvous. It's what holds those things together. Justice is what holds those things together. So yeah, the taboos are real, and for some reason, I decided to step on those landmines for a living.
Well, good for you for getting out there to do it. So I want to ask you about all 6 of the practices that you described in the book, but is there any particular one that you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think maybe I'll talk about the one that gives me the most challenge. And the one that gives me the most challenge is the idea of telling on yourself, right? Harvesting the discomfort of telling on yourself is incredibly difficult because so often I want to tell myself I'm beyond it. I want to tell myself that I've graduated from anti-oppression schools, that I've reached the status of what it means to be an ally. And then I'm reminded again that, in the book, I tell a story about I was at a conference in the South talking about mass incarceration, and a white brother stands up and says, "Thank you, Reverend Francois, but you're speaking to the choir. What we need to go talk to those other white people, those white folk." And in that moment, what comes to mind is, well, yeah, he says we're preaching to the choir. Well, even the choir needs rehearsal. Right? and so this idea that we all need to be in the process of rehearsing, that we're all living in many ways in this middle passage, getting closer, but not yet, right? That's the way we talk about the kingdom of God in the Christian tradition, is that it's here, but not yet. It is inaugurating, but still evolving. And I think that's how we have to see ourselves in what I call in the book reparative intercessors. That's how I talk about people who do this work, that we speak up and act up on behalf of other people. We use our power and our privilege, identifying that as a way of pushing opportunities, agendas, and practices that actually benefit the other. So when I think about harvesting the discomfort of telling on myself, that's the practice that I think is most important, because it forces me to sit with the ugliness that still lives in me. It forces me to constantly be in the process of interrogating how my sexism has the capacity to complicate my anti-racism. How my sometimes my affinity for capitalism and the ways that sees workers and other laborers as disposable. How do I guard against a sense of being exploitative as a pastor with hundreds of people who no matter what I say, want to serve me, want to make sure I'm okay. So attending to telling on myself, staring in the mirror, allowing myself to see where I'm still undone and where I need to continue to evolve, I think is a message that I hope all of us can commit to. And particularly what white men, particularly middle class and higher white men, will give themselves over to, that we never let ourselves off the hook just because we've demonstrated some improvement, just because we've come to some awarenesses.
Well, that's really helpful. And it's like, we're all human. So by definition, we're not perfect, right? And
Sure,
there's,
sure,
room
sure.
to improve on all of us, or for all of us on all fronts. So,
Yeah, and I think and I think that the way I try to frame it is to honor the fragility of all of our humanity, not just whiteness, but the fragility of humanity, and to offer a type of grace, as we to offer a type of grace that we don't take for granted, but a type of grace that honors the fact that we are all evolving. None of us are immune from the realities that white noise can grip us.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, for those of us, white Americans, I mean, do you have any suggestions of particular organizations or efforts that we should consider joining?
Sure. Well, maybe I have a more type of organization than actual organizations, because there are so many that do the work of racial justice, and I think do it well. But so one that requires an earnestness of doing the research, all right? And there's so many local organizations that we can volunteer in, that we can contribute to, that we can experience their work, experience their formative work, whether those are classes or workshops or the like. I think that one, we have a responsibility to do the research. We have a responsibility to figure out what's available to me that will allow me to practice anti-racism in meaningful ways. The other piece is looking for organizations that actually center Black leadership. Organizations that actually center Black leadership, and I would say definitely those that center the voices of Black women and Black queer people. It's just really, really important. Organizations that actually have a robust vision around what structural change looks like. I think that as I say in the book, we need to hold together what it means to disrupt individual racism and institutional racism. But I think there is often more attention given to the individualized racism that actually lets America off the hook in ways that we shouldn't let what we call the greatest nation in the world be off the hook. It's really hard to be great if we haven't figured out how to be morally good, right? As a nation. So organizations that are really committed to what structural change looks like. So often, in the book, I talk about structural racism and structural inequality and structural disparities. I want to see organizations that are investing in structural love. What does it mean to have a politics of love? What does it mean for not to legislate morality, because obviously that's not it, but in a way that we start to the same way that we have as a nation been consciously or unconsciously committed to structural harming of communities. How do we now think about what structural repair looks like? So organizations that are actively working on structural repair in some way, that are working on structural change in some way, or organizations, I think, that are actively on the ground. There's so many think tanks that sort of live disconnected from real people's lives. I think there's something to be said about a community of people that can depend on organizations to do life with them. So those are some of the touchstones of orgs that I would be looking at. Does it meet these criteria of sorts?
Cool. That's helpful. So I know you're in the middle of launching a new book, but are there any future projects, that you can talk about at this point?
Yeah. So I'm getting ready to consider pitching a project that has much more interface with the carceral system and how race and class are tied up in that, and how that too is damning our democracy. You mentioned at the top of our time together my work at New York Theological Seminary, where I am the director of a master's degree program that is at Sing Sing Prison, and in September, we will also be at Bedford Hills Prison. So we will be at a women's facility for the very first time. The program is 40 years old. The Sing Sing program is 40 years old, and it's the only master's degree program offered in a New York State prison. And so moving in and out of a maximum security prison and learning from incarcerated men over these last 2 years is really shaping a project for me, and thinking about the way they're patrolled on the inside is not terribly different from the way we're patrolled by policing on this side of the bar. So I'm looking towards this project of doing some practical work too, on how we can identify, how we can name, but also how we can start to disrupt this carceral machine that is devouring wages, that is damning opportunities for children, emptying homes of loving parents and potentially loving parents. So I'm really excited about the possibilities from that.
Good. Well, I hope you also take the same practical approach of not just describing the issue, but what we do about it.
It's
a difficult problem. I mean,
I hope I don't forget that in the middle of the ride. Diagnosing the problem is much easier than thinking through how do we start to solve it.
So, I totally agree.
I don't want to get trapped in the paralysis of analysis. I hope that I have some prognoses that I can offer for what too is a human rights crisis.
Good. So again, the new book is titled Silencing White Noise, 6 Practices to Overcome Our Inaction on Race. And you can learn more about Willie and all of his work at mountainscienceclc.org. Willie, thanks so much for joining us. Really great to get to know you. And I really appreciate, what you're doing.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation being released into the world, and the book coming into world, and seeing how we use it to make our nation better.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.